as we get started, I know some people kind of sit there and say, well, why should I even think about certification? Um, if you've got a career in human resources or you're building a career in human resources, the certification can really help boost your career along. If you're in finance, accounting, operations, administration, training, and you have some HR responsibilities, there's ways that you can get certified for the HR pieces in those as well. We're going to discuss some of those options as we go through. I'll be honest, one of the reasons why I got certified years ago, probably more years than I should admit to, was because I came to work at the Employers Association. And we had a couple of attorneys that were with us that had, that JD at the end of their name. We had a controller, that had that CPA at the end of their name. And while I had my bachelor's degree, I kind of wanted those initials to compete with them. So that was one of the main reasons why I got my certification, my SPHR. The certification will help you enhance your career. I have had calls from CEOs of HR professionals who have completed our study group, and the CEO is saying, okay, so how much should I now boost their salary? If they're certified, how much should they be paid? Where should they be? So we've had those calls. You can definitely enhance your earning potential. You'll also see, if you're looking for a new job, where certification is preferred or certification is required is getting to be more well known in the industry. There are two main HR generalist professional certifications that you can apply for, Hrci and SHRM. There are others that are out there. World at Work has a compensation specialist and SEBS has a benefits specialist. But these are the two that will give you the generalist background and the generalist certification. Hrci has been the industry standard since 1976. They at one point were under SHRM's umbrella, and they worked with SHRM to establish the original PHR and SPHR designations. Over 500,000 professionals have earned their Hrci certifications in over 125 countries. The PHR and SPHR are the most widely recognized HR certifications, and Hrci is the organization that owns those certifications and provides the test. The test is revised every 3 years, and all HR certifications are accredited through the National Commission for Certifying Agencies, the NCCA. Until around 1924, Hrci and Sherm worked together. Then, for whatever reason, and I'm not quite sure why, they separated. And SHRM developed their own certification, a new certification test. To date, over 100,000 individuals have been certified through the Sherm CP or the Sherm SCP programs, either through testing or through reciprocal designations on launch. When Sherm launched their SCP and CP, they allowed individuals that held the Hrci certifications to take a brief tutorial and then get the Sherm certifications. The Sherm certification is accredited in 2016 by the Burroughs Center for Testing. Hrci has an APHR designation, which is an assistant professional in human resources, as well as some global definitions and designations that are there. EA&E and our programs, we support both certifications. As you look at our study groups, as you look at our programs, we support both of them, whether you're looking to be certified for the first time or to get recertified. We have had many students that have taken the class, our study group, and passed the Hrci exam and then passed the Sherm exam. All certifications require some kind of testing. And to prepare for the test, you can do it in a variety of ways. You can self-study. You can take a certification course in person. You can take an online certification course, or you can just wing it. How you prepare is really up to you. And if you talk to individuals that have taken the test, they're going to tell you that it is very hard. And it is. It's dealing with real world, all of them are dealing with real world situations and real world laws and regulations, but they're things that we don't always think about on a day-to-day basis. We don't need to know about them every day, and so we don't. I know when I started studying for my certification, one of the practice tests I took asked what was the fine for an OSHA violation. Well, heck, I didn't know. If I needed to know that, I would have gone to EANE, or I would have gone to a resource and gotten that. But those are the things that the test is going to test on. You can self-study. When you're preparing for the exam, there's a lot of work that goes into it. So you can set up a study class and you can purchase materials, or you can review things yourself. EANE, and we'll talk more in detail about it, we have a certification course that happens in person. There's also an online certification course that we partner with our North Carolina class, our organization on. I don't know of anyone that has really taken the test for the first time without some type of certification. I do know individuals who have recertified, who let their certification lapse, needed to take the test again to recertify, and they did it without a study class. But how you learn really depends upon you and what's right for you, and at the time in your life that you're doing it. Is going to make the determination as to how you prepare. HRCI launched an APHR certificate. They did this for a few reasons. One is that they knew that individuals who were new to HR, who might just be coming out of college, might be coming out of a different organization, and wanted to get into HR, needed to gain some type of a benchmark, some type of a baseline of knowledge to move forward. They also understood that for the certification exams, the PHR, the SPHR, the Sherm CP, and the Sherm SCP, to take the test, you have to be able to prove that you're spending at least half your time on human resource types of issues. And they knew that there are a variety of roles out there in organizations that touch on HR, but aren't focused on it for 50% of the time. So they've put together this APHR for those that may have maybe in a supervisory or a management role, maybe in payroll, maybe your CFO or your financial person, and they want that baseline in HR, but they don't need one of the other certifications. To take this, you only need a high school diploma. You can get any of the details at hrci.org or call us, and we'll be happy to help you. We do have a boot camp to prepare for that. And if you've taken EANE's HR Essentials program, that will give you a lot of the information that you need for the exam. If you're looking at going higher, if you're looking at the PHR exam or the Sherm CP exam, you need to have a degree and a certain level of experience. If you don't have a degree, you can substitute years of experience. When you're looking at these, it is important to know that the years of experience are important. The exam looks at, or all of the exams look at your knowledge about laws and regulations and situations, but it also is looking for you to apply your experience. And if you don't have much experience, then you aren't going to be able to really pass the test. The PHR designation, HRCI's designation, is looking at just HR professional level experience and general degrees. So my bachelor's degree is in marketing. I could have paired that with 2 years of HR professional experience and taken the exam. When I took the exam, you needed to have more years of experience. Sherm, on the other hand, is looking for an HR degree. So if your bachelor's degree is in marketing, like mine is, I would need the bachelor's degree and 2 years of HR experience. But if my bachelor's degree was in human resources, then I would only need 1 year of HR experience. While you can take any of these tests, and we'll get into the higher level ones in just a moment, with that minimum level of experience, it really is wise to have more years of experience, and also to look at how many organizations you've worked for. The SPHR and the Sherm SCP are higher level certifications. They're looking at senior status. They're looking at individuals that are truly business partners. They're looking at strategic HR partners within the organization. And so with these degrees, or with these certifications, it is really imperative that you have a variety of experience behind you, that you're looking not only at the number of years, but the organizations that you've worked for and where your position has been placed within that organization. If you've really been at just the administrative level, implementing policies and practices and procedures that have been set up by others, then the senior level, the SPHR and the Sherm SCP, are probably not for you. These are for individuals that really are strategic. They're negotiating insurance plans. They're interacting with the C-suite executives. They're developing strategy. They're involved in the organization's long-range planning. They really are helping at the highest level within the organization. We're going to look at the exam content for both of these individually. And give you a better sense of where they are, where the content comes from, and what the questions are like. You can find out more information, obviously, at hrci.org or at sherm.org. For HRCI, their questions, their exams are built around this body of knowledge. They're looking at leadership and strategy, business management, talent planning and acquisition, learning and development, total rewards, and employee and labor relations. The percentage of questions that are coming onto the exam is what's listed here. So 20% of the questions that would be on the PHR exam are coming from business management, from that unit and that chapter, whereas 40% is coming from for the SPHR, and it's named slightly different. It's leadership and strategy. So you can see here where there's a distinct difference in the questions that are going to show up at on the exam based upon the level that you are going to be taking. Employee and labor relations is the strongest areas where most of the questions are going to come for the PHR. And those are your employee relations situations. They're the things that you're dealing with day in and day out. It does get into labor unions, which many of us need a refresher on because we haven't had much experience in those areas. Any questions on this setup or this way of doing things before we move on? Okay, hearing none, we'll move along and give you an example of where talent and planning and acquisition questions would vary between the PHR, the Sherm CP, and the SPHR and the Sherm SCP questions would be. At the PHR level, the questions are going to really be around whether you understand the federal laws and know how to adhere to the legal and ethical requirements for hiring. It's that day-to-day implementation. Do you know what the law stands for? Do you know how it affects your recruiting challenges, your selection challenges? Whereas at the SPHR level and the Sherm SCP level, the questions that are in that talent planning and acquisition area are going to be looking at whether you know how to evaluate and forecast what your organizational needs are going to be throughout their business cycle. What do they need moving forward? If you're a seasonal employer, when does that season come? When do you need to ramp up? How are you going to ramp up? How far in advance do you need to do that? Where are the people that you're going to find to do that ramp up? So the SPHR and the Sherm SCP, are going to be more geared around evaluating and forecasting. An example of what a PHR or Sherm SCP or Sherm CP question would be asking which of the following statements regarding any procedure that tends to screen out members of a protected group is correct. A, it is illegal. B, it's presumptively discriminatory. C, it's in violation of Title VII. Or D, it's in violation of the 1991 Civil Rights Act. Would anybody like to take a guess at what the right answer is? You can put it in the chat if you'd rather not say. No takers? All right. The answer here is B. It is presumptively discriminatory. And this shows a couple of different things. One is it's looking at the knowledge. Do you understand what they are going to be doing and why a procedure might be screening out members? We are also looking at here, we're going to be giving you test taking techniques. And on the questions, you want to look at things and don't take them in a final standpoint. So A, it is illegal. That's just saying it's blatantly illegal. It's in violation. It's in violation. It's presumptively discriminatory. It may not be discriminatory, and you have to be able to prove that. So that's the type of question that the PHR is going to be looking at. Moving along to Sherm, and SHRM and HRCI have taken great pains to try to separate the body of knowledge and separate the areas that they're going to be looking at. When you look at the study materials that would be for both exams, whether they're like our situation where it's one set of study materials, or if you were to purchase the Sherm ones and purchase HRCI ones, you'll see that they really work together, that they are very, very similar. Sherm has just recently updated its body of knowledge. It used to be called the body of knowledge. Now it is the body of applied skills and knowledge, the Sherm BASC, as it's known. And it's looking at behavioral competencies, ethical practices, leadership, business acumen, relationship, communication, consultation, critical evaluation, and global and cultural effectiveness. But these are behaviors. They're the way that we act. They may be based in laws and regulations, but you're looking at behavioral competencies. Let me point out one thing on this slide and at the bottom of it. The HRCI has global PHR and SPHR levels, that individuals that have a lot of global work in their job can take and be certified at that level. SHRM does not have a global certification. So you'll find that the SHRM CP and the SCP do have more questions on it related to international law, global practices, and cultural effectiveness. Not enough to really adjust any of the study techniques or the ways of looking at things, but they do have more questions in that area because they don't have a separate exam for that global designation. The Sherm example or exam composition is set up around behavioral competency clusters and HR knowledge domains, excuse me. Item types, situational judgment. 40% of the Sherm exams are going to be situations where they're going to give you a page or a paragraph that's going to lay out a situation that you might run into in your HR world. And then the next 5 or 6 questions are going to tie back to that particular situation. That's where they specifically lay out those situations and then question you on them. The Hrci exam has situational ones, but they're more likely to give you a brief paragraph and then ask you one question about the situation, whereas Sherm gives you a much longer one, and then you have to answer several questions around it. The HR specific knowledge, again, is looking at those laws and regulations. Do you know what they are? Do you know how they are implemented? Each exam has been developed around key competency areas. There are some individuals that would say that the Sherm exam is the only one that is based on competencies. But the HR one, or Hrci one, is also based on competencies. The difference, again, that I think you'll find is that SHRM has laid out their own competency model, and they have tailored their exam around that. Hrci has taken the competency models from Sherm, from World at Work, from SEBS, from leadership, from a variety of different areas, and have put together their exam around those various competency models. They are developed by subject matter experts. They're developed by individuals like you and me, certified HR professionals that write the exam questions for each competency area, and then they're tested. There is a peer review that's conducted on each question to ensure that it's accurate, current, and appropriate. And then each of the exams, and we'll go through these separately in a few minutes, have pre-tested questions. So when you sit down to take the Hrci exam or the Sherm exam, there are a certain number of questions that are not going to feed into your score. They're being pre-tested. They're ones to see whether everybody gets them, whether they're confusing. They're looking at how reliable they are as far as getting the answers. The exam forms are created and reviewed by another panel of subject matter experts, and then a passing score for each exam is set. The PHR and the SPHR exams, at one point, they were the same number of questions and they were the same length, which made it very easy to explain and to talk about with people. But last year, they have broken them up. The PHR and SPHR exams are given at Pearson VUE locations. If you want to go into a situation, into a location and take your exam, you would do it at a Pearson VUE location. With COVID, both Hrci and Sherm have moved to giving them virtually, so you could take them at your home, you could take them at work, you could take them someplace else. There are a variety of hoops that you have to jump through to do that, but you can definitely do that. The PHR exam is made up of 115 questions. 25 are pre-test questions, so they're ones that are not going to count towards your score. And you have 2 hours to take that exam. The SPHR has 140 questions, and 25 of those are field questions, ones that they're testing out. And you have 2.5 hours to take the exam. We'll explain a little bit about the various question format for the PHR and the SPHR in a minute. Well, none of these exams will give you partial credit. So if you don't answer the question, it's immediately wrong. On the Sherm or the Hrci exams, where you may have to choose 3 answers, if you only get 2, then it's wrong. So there is no partial credit in either of these exams. The Sherm CP and Sherm SCP exams are given at Prometric locations, and both Prometric and Pearson VUE have a lot of locations around the area, so you can pick the one that's closest to you. The Sherm exam has 160 questions. 60 of them are standalone knowledge-based ones where they're going to be asking about particular laws and regulations, and 40% of the questions, as I mentioned before, are scenario-based. 24 of those 160 questions are field questions, that they're ones that they are trying to test out. You have 4 hours to do the Sherm exam. In addition to the 4 hours, and they do lay out in their guidebook that there's a certain amount of time, and both organizations do this, where there's a little bit of a tutorial on how to use the computer, how to use their system to make it work. And then at the end, there are demographic questions that are going to ask you things like, how did you prepare for the exam? What's your length of experience in HR? Those types of things. All of the Sherm CP and SCP exams are straight multiple choice. You're going to pick A, B, C, or D, and that's it. One of them is going to be the right answer. Again, there is no partial credit. One of the other things that I'll say with these exams, and Sherm actually calls this out in their booklet, but then they contradict themselves a little bit further. All of these exams, all 4 of these exams, really kind of make the assumption that you are operating in a world where you can do everything the right way. You can do everything where you can organize things, you can plan things out, you can follow a process, you can follow a procedure, you can test things. That while Sherm says they're not operating and their exams don't operate in a perfect world, both of these really do, because as I look around the room and I see those of you that are on the call here, I know the organizations you're working for, and all of us don't have a lot of time to prepare. When we think back to COVID and hitting in 2020, many of you had to get your workforces remote at the drop of a hat, or had to lay people off at the drop of a hat. There wasn't time to prepare. So both of these exams are really looking at an HR world where you have the time to lay things out, prepare, test different training programs, see if they're going to work before you move forward with things. For the HRCI exam, they will have some multiple questions on it. So instead of just multiple choice where you're going to pick A, B, C, or D, you will run into a question like this, which says, which types of complaints does the EEOC investigate? And you need to pick 3. If you only pick 1, you don't get partial credit. You have to pick all 3. Anybody want to try the answers for this one? I'm guessing not. So the answers here are A, D, and F. Those are the types of complaints that the EEOC investigates. The other type of question that you're going to find on the HRCI exam that you won't find on the Sherm exam is a fill in the blank. Those of us that can go back into our college or high school or elementary school days can remember those fill in the blank questions. So this is a sample. The letter an employee may receive from the EEOC when they have determined harassment did occur is called what? And you need to fill in the blank. One of the things, and they try to keep these fairly basic and simple because spelling matters, punctuation matters, capitalization matters. And so you aren't going to find a lot of the fill in the blank. And if you do, they're going to be fairly basic types of questions. The answer here is right to sue. The last type of question that's different from a regular multiple choice that you're going to see on the HRCI exam is matching, a drag and drop type of matching. So they're going to be asking you to match the performance review tools that are listed there with the descriptions that are over on the right. And you need to, again, match them up perfectly. If you miss 1, which means you'll probably miss 2, you don't get partial credit. So if you want to take a look at these, the correct answers, management by objectives is number 1. The manager and employee collaborate on setting goals. Forced distribution is number 2. The supervisor must assign certain proportion of their subordinates to each of several categories. It reminds me of the bell curve when we were grading things or being graded in high school and college. Ranking system, B, is number 3. Employer lists all subordinates from highest to lowest. And A is number 4, a behavioral anchored rating scale, which is usually one of the things that most of us use, but never probably knew that it was called a behaviorally anchored rating scales. I can say that 3 times fast. So those are the different types of questions that you're going to get. Some individuals use that and say, oh, because of all of those, I don't think I want to take that exam. I'm going to stick with the SHRM one. They really aren't that difficult, and a good study group will prepare you to take a look at these and be able to figure them out. It will give you good test-taking techniques. The exam application process for the PHR and the SPHR, and even for the Sherm one, which we'll talk about in a moment, is multi-step. What you need to do is go to hrci.org. You open an application. You put in a bunch of information about yourself, your background. You need to identify what your job title is, what your job title has been, how you're going to prove that you've got those years of experience behind you. And then you move to paying a fee to actually take the exam. The APHR is $400, $350 if you're an EA&E member, and PHR and SPHR, you can see those as you go along. EA&E has a partner relationship with HRCI, and so there is a $50 discount if you're an EA&E member. And when you go to pay for the exam, it'll give you the option of putting that in. One of the other differences here is that HRCI offers insurance at the time of registration. So if you are going to take the SPHR exam, maybe you aren't that confident, maybe you just want to be sure. The insurance at this time is about $250. But if by chance you don't pass the SPHR exam, you can retake it 90 days later and not pay a fee. You've bought the insurance, you don't have to pay for the exam again. If you took the SPHR, maybe on a whim, you were kind of hoping you could pass that level, but weren't quite sure you'd be able to. Within that 90-day window, within 30 days, you could take the PHR exam. You could take a lower level exam if you wanted to. So the insurance is only available at the time of registration. It is a security blanket. In case you don't pass, that you don't have to pay the entire price of the exam again. May or may not be something that you want to be doing. These prices are effective as of January of 2022. Periodically, HRCI and Sherm will run specials, and they'll say you can apply for this amount or give you a discount. So you want to check their website as you register. Each of these exams, as part of that $400, $495, $595, there's a $100 non-refundable application fee. So there are certain circumstances under which you can apply and get your money back, but that $100 is non-refundable. I think I missed something. Yes, on the HRCI exam, the HRCI exam is given all year long. So there's not a testing window. You can apply for the exam, and once you apply and get the approval, you have 180 days from that date to actually take the exam. So you can take it at any time during the year. There's not a certain testing window, so you could apply now and you could take it in March. You could apply now and take it in September. You have a window of time in which you can take it. And there was another thought that went through my mind as I said that, and it went in one ear and out the other. So as I remember it, I will bring it back up again to you. But the exam is an open application and testing. I know what it was. with all of these, there are 2 steps. So you're going to apply for this one to HRCI. They are going to give you a letter, an email that's going to say, okay, you've passed all of our criteria. You can call Pearson VUE and set up a time to take the exam. And then you actually work with Pearson VUE to get your exam scheduled. Same type of thing is going to be there for SHRM. Any questions on that? Okay. For the Sherm exams, the Sherm CP and the Sherm SCP, they have testing windows. So this year, the exam dates are, you can take the exams between May 1st and July 15th, or you can wait and take them from December 1st to February 15th of 2023. Those are the only times that the exam is given. Whether you're going to go into Prometric and take it there, or whether you're going to do it at home or at a work location, you can only take it during those time frames. Applications are being accepted now for the May date. The early bird time frame is now through March 18th. The standard is March 19th through April 8th. And you can see below there are some differences in the fee. The early bird fee is $300 for Sherm members and $400 for non-Sherm members. And the standard fee is $375 for SHRM members and $475 if you're not a Sherm member. We were not able to negotiate a partnership with SHRM, so there is not a discount for being an EANE member for the Sherm exam. I'm sorry about that. If I could do it again, I would try to work harder. Both exams are scored in a very similar fashion. They use a weighted scoring. And so when you think back to other exams that you may have taken, generally each question is worth 1 point, 5 points, 10 points, whatever it may be, and you add up the points at the end, and that's your score. For these exams, they use a weighted scoring. And what that means is that question 1 may count more than question 5. So question 1 may be worth 3 points, and question 5 may only be worth ½ a point. They weight the exams and they weight the questions. So it's very difficult to look at how many questions you need to get correct in order to pass the exam. What we generally look at with individuals is that you generally need to have 75 to 80% of the questions correct in order to pass. When you're doing a study group, you're doing a prep class, as you're doing practice tests, you want to be sure that you're hitting that level before you go and actually take the exam. For Sherm, your score can range from 120 to 200. Everyone that passes the exam gets a 200. They don't go up beyond that. If you don't pass, you're going to get below 200. HRCI gives you a scaled score between 100 and 700. Passing is 500 plus. So if you get 502, you're going to pass. If you get 600, you're going to pass. And when you get your score, you'll get what that score is and what that definition is. Both of these organizations, when you go into Prometric or Pearson VUE, when you take the exam at home or at work on your own computers, as soon as you're done, you will get a preliminary designation. It'll say, congratulations, you've passed, or I'm sorry, you didn't pass. They say that those are reviewed and then confirmed within a few days to 2 weeks. I have not had anybody that got a preliminary designation of passing where that was ever pulled back. And I've been teaching the class for 22 years maybe, so more than I probably should be. But you're going to see that definition. What you'll also get then is within a few days to a couple of weeks after the exam, you'll get a more detailed report. even if you pass, you'll get a report that will show you how you compare to others on the exam or what proportion you answered correctly. So if you're looking to recertify or if you're looking to strengthen your knowledge, there may be certain areas that you want to go back and take a look at. Certainly, if you don't pass, that's the report really that you want to look at and prepare for as you go forward before you take the exam again, because that's going to tell you the chapters, the units, the areas that you need to study more for. Recent pass rates as of 12/20, 86% of those that took the APHR passed, 71% for the PHR and 60% for the SPHR. The Sherm in the 12/20 to 2/21 test window, 67% passed the CP exam and 51% passed the SCP exam. So you can see that the exams, are difficult. They aren't just going to be a breeze to pass. If you are a Massachusetts, if you're working for a Massachusetts employer, Massachusetts has a workforce training fund, which provides some different ways that can help you pay for your study group. The Express Grant is open to all employers who contribute to the unemployment fund in Massachusetts. Applications have to be submitted 3 weeks before the class starts, so you're running a little tight for the PHR and SPHR study group that starts on February 1st, but you can get up to 50% or up to 100% if you're under 100 employees of the class paid for. There are also general grants, but that takes a longer period of time. Unfortunately, Connecticut and Rhode Island don't offer those. So if you're working for an employer that's there, you don't have those options. We will keep trying to work with them to see if we can get them in place. EANE has several study options for the APHR class. We have a 3-day boot camp and we have 3 full days of classes. We haven't run those that much. We haven't found that there's been an overwhelming demand. For the PHR and the SPHR, the Sherm CP and the Sherm SCP, we run a weekly study program that meets once a week. We do 10 sessions of 3 hours each. Traditionally, it's 3 to 5, and we include dinner. We believe in that, if you feed them, they will come. But also after a long day at work, you need sustenance. You need something to kind of keep you going. Our 10-week study group will help you prepare for the Hrci or the Sherm exam. There's also an online study program where we partner with our sister association, Catapult, down in North Carolina. These are live webinars, so it's not self-paced. It's not something that you're going to get the materials and then you kind of study on your own. These are ones where weekly there's a class that's 3 hours. David Seiler teaches them and he does a great job of teaching them, and he has a great crew online with him to help with questions and to get anybody that is not in the room involved with it. They run them at various days and times during the day and at night. It is offered through our partner, Let's Catapult, and you can ask us questions. You can come to some of our classes if you need to. Call us for some of the details around this. All of our classes, whether they're the online or the 10-week study group, we provide a lot of materials. We use Distinctive HR materials, which has a study guide, online training videos, flashcards, sample tests, audio recordings, test-taking techniques. There are games that we play with every chapter to give you an idea into how to answer the questions. I think regardless of where you study, whether it's through us or whether it's through a lot of the SHRM chapters have study groups for the exam, you want to participate. The real advantage of participating in a study group is that ability to talk about things, to ask questions of others that are around you, to say, hey, I grew up in the banking world. we didn't have much experience with OSHA. Talk with me about some of the safety things. Talk with me about lockout, tagout. Talk with me about a safety audit. It helps to have those discussions. And that's our classes are really geared around discussion. We want to talk about the material. There is no class, whether it's at the college level, whether it's through a Sherm study group, whether it's ours, that is going to cover absolutely everything that could be on the exam, because there's a tremendous volume of information that could be put on the exam. But we look to cover the main things, as do the other groups, and look to cover questions that people have if they haven't had experience in various areas. If you're an organization that wants to support this for your company, if you have 6 or more participants, we can bring it on site. We have done this for some of our larger members. We've actually run the group on site to get people prepared. Whether you do it on site or whether you do it through a study group, be sure that you get the list of participants so that you can call people between classes. You can ask questions. Very few people take the exam as soon as the class is over. You certainly can, but very few people do. They usually like to have some other type of time to cram and really study harder for it. So if you've got that support network, you can use that and ask questions and meet after whatever study group or class is over. When you're looking at certification, you really want to look at your motivation. Why are you doing this? Do you need HR knowledge for your career? Is your career in HR? How much do you truly know about HR? When I took the exam, I had about 15 years of experience, and I thought, I don't need to study. I got all this experience. I know a lot about HR. I can pass this SPHR exam in my sleep. This is going to be not a problem. I took one of the practice tests and I only got 50% of the questions right. Because what it's dealing with, again, as I've said, is a perfect world where you have time to think and plan and walk through every step that might fit into a different scenario or a different new function or a different process or procedure that you want to put in place. It also deals with things that you don't need to know on a daily basis, such as my question about what's the OSHA fine if you're fined for a safety violation. I didn't know. I wouldn't need to know that. So you want to think about how much of your experience you have and where it has been. What level do you have? Can you provide proof of your experience? This was one of my scary pieces when I actually took the exam, because I had grown up through a lot of different banks, and most of my organizations had been absorbed by other banks. And so they had no record that I ever worked there. So I was really kind of going back through, what do I have to prove that I have that experience? Because you are going to need to prove that. And there are a certain number of applications that just slide through. There are others that they're going to go back and audit. In what areas of HR do you have experience? You don't have to have touched all of those areas in order to pass the exam. Very few people that we have in our study groups have actually dealt with labor unions, and yet they pass and they know that information when they go in. When I came in, I had grown up in banking and we didn't have any OSHA regulations. We were exempt. I didn't know anything about safety. So you don't have to have experience in everything, but you have to be able to have the framework to understand it and to learn it. What's your training budget? Can you afford to do the study group as well as take the exam? And one of the key things is, how much time are you willing to spend? The exams are not something that you can just come to a class once a week or come to a study group once a week and pass. You need to read the material. You need to think about the material. You need to do various study work before you come in. You need to spend a significant amount of time preparing for this. We've had individuals that have said, you know what, I took every Sunday or 3/4 of every Sunday during the study group to study and prepare, and they're the ones that really passed. I had an individual who had been in HR for a long time. She just came to the class every week. I knew she wasn't doing the reading. She wasn't looking at things. She took the exam 3 times and did not pass either time. So you have to dedicate some time. So you need to look at, is this the time? Can you do it now? A lot of HR people are still very up to their ears in COVID and the Hrci ETS and all types of things. So this may not be the time to look at certification. Or you may want to look at the class now, but plan on taking the exam sometime in the fall. Look at what's your learning style. How do you learn? Be sure that whatever way you're studying and preparing, that you've got a variety of different ways of doing it. That's one of the reasons why our materials have a learning guide. They have videos online. You can listen to recorded classes. There are troublesome topics. There are flashcards. There are sample tests. What's your learning style? How do you learn, and what's going to be the best way for you? And then look at and see what are some of the other things around certification that might be important for you to take a look at. Which option is right for you depends upon who you are and where you are. Which test option depends upon what you'd like to see, what initials you'd like to have behind your name. We've had individuals that have taken the Hrci exam and then turned around right away and taken the SHRM exam so that they have both of those sets of initials. It's really up to you. For this year, EANE is offering our study group in Agawam and in Wallingford, Connecticut. If you're interested in having it in a different location, email me or email John Henderson, and we'll see what the demand is and if we can get it scheduled and set up someplace. For the APHR, there's a 2-day boot camp. We have our 10-week study group. There's an online group. And as I said, most of the Sherm chapters also offer some type of study class. If you'd like more information, reach out to any of us that are on the HR hotline. Rick from the membership team is very familiar with things, as is John Henderson, who's head of our learning and development. So any of these options are available to you. We would be happy to talk with you further or help you with anything. I thank you very much for joining me today. If you have any questions, please, feel free to put them in the chat so that I can answer them for you, or email me once we're done.